What is music therapy? You know, what is music therapy?
What do I know about music therapy?
I'm not really familiar with music therapy.
Music soothes the savage beast. That would be me, savage beast.
May be a way to get over pain.
It relaxes everything that you have inside of you internally, spiritually.
To me, it seems like it'd be music to help people that are depressed or something.
Some sort of like hypnotized thing, like if you hear like this type of melody, you'll like resort to being calm and such.
The sound we're listening to right now actually is music therapy.
Our body works off of different harmonics and different tones. You know, like usually you could tell like if something's like plugged in, it's like a different tone, you can hear it. So music can affect the way we work, the way our like atoms vibrate and everything, the frequencies of it. It really affects our mood.
Say it's a stressful day at work and you just need to let yourself go, you know, calm down.
The sound of the wind might be music therapy when you close your eyes.
Like Tibetan crystal bowls, like those are beautiful. Like they make like a really amazing harmonic and it just hits you really deep.
The rain itself can be music therapy.
If you take the music and aromatherapy and put that together, that's like nirvana.
Music is the only way to detoxicate your soul from everything you've been through.
Like a therapy dog, but instead of with music, soothing, calm music.
I bet you could use music therapy to help kids study. I bet it could help people focus.
If you listen to like a lot of like heavy music, it really can affect your psyche without you realizing it.
So what is music therapy?
So if you walk into a setting and somebody says, "What's music therapy?" What would you say to them?
I would cry and weep. What do I say? You spend years trying to figure this out when you're in school.
Music therapy. It's a field that's wildly misunderstood.
You can't get past the music part. I mean, we use music, that's our tool. But when people hear music therapy, they're going to think, oh, that's fun, entertainment, relaxing. There's a connotation that comes up.
Part of the challenge is that everyone knows something about music. Everyone likely can relate to being moved deeply by a particular song. Based on their own experience, it's natural to speculate about what music therapy might be.
It's true. There were a lot of people that were like, music therapy? I've never heard of that, or what's that about? I get that question very often.
I first heard about music therapy in 1979 when a classmate told me it was her college major. It was a foreign concept to me, and try as she might, I never fully understood nor completely believed the claims she made about its power. It seemed absurd to imagine that without even touching a patient, a therapist could effect healing. Yet this phenomenon has been observed for thousands of years. The ancient Greeks and Chinese, Sumerians and Harappan all described the healing power of music. One of the earliest records is of David, who famously eased the suffering of his warrior king, Saul, perhaps of PTSD, by playing the lyre. And the Greek biographer Iamblichus reported that Pythagoras had devised certain melodies as remedies against despondency, lamentation, rage, and anger some 500 years before the Common Era. Musical awareness is intrinsic to being human. Indeed, I've never met a person who doesn't like some type of music. It exists in every culture, from the most modern societies to the smallest tribes. What is essential about our humanity can be found in our music. What's more, although birds sing, they cannot recognize their own song if it's transposed to a different key. Humans have no such trouble. We recognize happy birthday, regardless of how out of tune it may be sung. This is key. Linguists theorize that humans communicated first through song and only gradually developed spoken language from it. Bone flutes and other instruments are among the oldest archaeological artifacts. In his book, The Singing Neanderthals, archaeologist Stephen Mython cannot imagine a time or a culture when people didn't sing and dance, children play musical games, mothers hum to their babies, or communal singing to commemorate important events. As he notes, without music, the prehistoric past is just too quiet to be believed. The neurologist Oliver Sacks observed in his book, Musicophilia, that our propensity to music shows itself in infancy and probably goes back to the very beginnings of our species. We are hardwired for music. The first bones to develop in the human fetus are the ear bones. The inner ear has some 60,000 tiny hairy cells, each resonating to specific frequencies like microscopic tuning forks. And when they resonate, a neurological impulse is sent to the brain, causing the release of neuropeptides, and things light up. In addition to the sense of sound, we are also rhythmic beings. Our heartbeat and respiration, constant realities, even if unnoticed. Crying newborns can be calmed simply by hearing their mother's voice or by lying on their mother's chest, because their voice and heartbeat are familiar sounds and rhythms. Even people who cannot hear have a profound response to this. The actual sound waves themselves fall not only upon the ear, but are also felt in the body, particularly when produced by drums or bass instruments. Modern music therapy emerged from a rather unlikely source. Interest in the role music could play in the rehabilitation of the wounded grew in the wake of World War I and developed as more wounded veterans flooded military hospitals during World War II. At Vaughan General Hospital in Hines, Illinois, a neuropsychiatric ward contained many veterans who would do nothing but lie in bed, motionless and speechless. However, upon hearing music, they would sing and dance along. In October 1943, Surgeon General Norman T. Kirk advised that music become an official part of the Army's reconditioning program. Many hospitals began organized hospital bands, while others invited celebrities to perform. Although much of the focus was on improving morale, physical and psychological improvements that resulted from the music itself did not go unnoticed. And in 1945, a technical bulletin was issued by the War Department that included a call for additional formal research. Over time, the important distinction between therapeutic music and music as therapy began to emerge. A volunteer playing piano in a hospital lobby, a youth group singing carols in a nursing home, hospice nurses playing recorded music for the dying. These all have their place, but they are not clinical music therapy. Clinical music therapy is a treatment program delivered by a highly trained individual to develop, maintain, or restore some specific ability. In the 1950s, Paul Nordhoff and Clive Robbins created an improvisational approach based on the belief that everyone is capable of finding meaning in and benefiting from musical experiences. The Nordhoff-Robbins approach focuses on treatment through the creation of music by therapist and client together, and can be used to accommodate all abilities. Beginning in the 1960s, Helen Lindquist Bonney developed the Bonney method of guided imagery and music, which combines mental imagery and music to help with physiological and psychological ailments, as well as to deepen self-awareness and to foster growth.
Will respond with the most efficient and effective imagery, and that music is the central evoking agent. The therapist and the music provide a setting within.
In the 1970s, Gertrude Orff began to adapt the Orff-Schulewerk method. The basis of her approach is known as responsive interaction, wherein the therapist begins at the child's level and responds according to the child's initiatives. Improvisation is a central factor of this multisensory approach and includes spontaneous play, such as bouncing marbles off a hand drum. In 1944, Michigan State University developed the first undergraduate program. The University of Kansas developed the first graduate program in 1946. Other schools quickly followed suit, including the Chicago Musical College, Alverno College, and the College of the Pacific. The number of colleges and universities offering bachelor's, master's, and PhD programs has grown from the initial handful to more than 70 throughout the United States. Yet despite this long and rich history, there remains widespread confusion in the general public about music therapy.
The world needs to know what music therapy is. It seems like every time it's reintroduced back into the media or in the spotlight, it's a brand new thing.
More and more, we are having to contact our state representatives and even national representatives to really make music therapy known as a health field.
It's a board certified profession. We're a highly trained music therapist, has specific measurable outcomes, specifically designed interventions to help an individual, blah, 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 all this clinical language. And at that point, their eyes glaze over.
People need to see what it is. You can't talk about it all day. They're not going to understand it until they see it.
Our very first session was with an 18-year-old boy who was cognitively and physically functioning at about a 1-year-old level. And I had the opportunity to be hands-on with him as the music therapist was facilitating the interventions. And the responses that we got out of him in the very first session, the first few minutes, was more than anybody that even had worked with him every single day had ever seen from this boy. And the people were coming in the room and they were crying and they couldn't believe the responses that music was eliciting.
What's really helpful is to think that there's a therapist, there's music, and there's a client, and that we're looking for a specific outcome. And our job is to be flexible to whatever that is. And they say, well, could you use music for this? Yeah, huh? Before they even say what it is, could you do? Yeah. It doesn't matter what the scenario is because a creative music therapist will ask herself or coordinate with colleagues to find the music that will work in that situation. Is it songwriting? Is it active music making? Is it passive? Is it moving to music? And get as creative as you want in the application of it. That's why no day is ever the same.
The most recent approach to music therapy emerged in 1999. With advancements in brain imaging techniques, Michael Taut began to explore specifically why music could be an agent of change.
The notion that we needed to look into a different theoretical foundation for music in therapy and music as therapy, that was really the first theoretical step. And then I picked rhythm as the musical element to study first. But I had to make that switch from a more interpretive, cultural, social, emotional concept into I'm going to study how music elements, patterns in music are processed and if they create therapeutic changes. In the Parkinson patient, the basal ganglia is responsible for timing and it's highly dysfunctional. So how does the rhythmic cue from the outside shape or drive that system? What we are looking at right now is what actually happens in the brain when we turn the music on and the rhythm and the patient begins to synchronize their emotions. The rhythm constrains time. The brain has additional information to program how fast do I need to take off, when do I have to start decelerating to slow down, and what path can I take from point A to B to get my movement embedded between beat 1 and beat 2.
This study, I'm working with Dr. Tao, Dr. Gavin, and Dr. Patty Davies in examining the neural mechanisms underlying auditory motor entrainment. And to understand the neural aspect, we use EEG, that's electroencephalography, wherein we have participants just wear a cap, and then we have 64 sensors that go in, and then we also have some sensors on the face, and all of these pick up electrical potentials from the scalp, which reflect your electrical potentials from the brain, from the surface of your brain. So this is the raw EEG we get from a participant when they're just listening to the auditory stimulus, and this marker here, the S16, is the auditory stimulus. So you can see every time they hear the beat, we get a marker, so we know that this is when they've heard the beat. So from a raw EEG, you really cannot interpret what's happening. And so we analyze the data further. Now, this is a segment called an eventuated potential. Time 0 is when they've heard the segment, so this is an average of all the 400 times they've heard a segment. And so we get a beautiful brain response to the auditory stimulus.
The biggest uniqueness about music perception in the brain is that there are multiple distributed and hierarchically distributed areas that become active. So music actually engages a lot of software, hardware in the brain. The bigger the ball, the more input from other regions and output from that particular area to other regions will happen. So these are not just topographical indicators, but there are connectivity indicators. So when the patients tap their hand to rhythmic auditory stimulation in the brain scanner, then we see suddenly a very big area here in blue. These are a little smaller, but they're still quite active. So in other words, there's a lot of input going in and a lot of output from these regions. These are motor regions in the premotor cortex, supplementary motor area, and also in the primary motor cortex. We would not see that with the healthy subjects, and we also don't see that with patients when they tap just with their fingers without the support of rhythmic cues. We are assuming that the motor regions becoming so extremely active in this simple task to assist the basal ganglia. The task itself doesn't really require that much activity. That is for a theoretical understanding of NMT in terms of brain rehabilitation, of course. A blessing in disguise, which we didn't realize in the beginning, because we can now really make a very good case that we are engaging with music-based therapeutic exercises a lot of generic areas, control areas in the brain responsible for language, movement, and cognition. If you look at shaping behavior and brain through music, we need to look at the actual patterns in the music that do that. And that change was the key to everything. For a lot of other people in the field of science and medicine, it becomes also a lot clearer to wrap their brain around. Some group of language scientists decides, well, let's see if we can replicate that and study the effect of music and singing on speech production in stutterers or in aphasic patients. I'm not the only one who does research now supporting NMT applications anymore. That has changed a long time ago. We sat down as a group, Jerry McIntosh and Volker Humberg was the other neurologist who was also the co-editor of the Oxford Handbook, and then Ruth Rice and Corinne.
I was there at the right time to be a part of that whole movement.
Discovery process.
Yep, that whole discovery process. We came up with the rational scientific mediating model. We started looking at research and classifying it in 4 different areas. One was, what does it tell us about what's going on in the brain when it perceives a musical stimulus? You know, what parts of the brain are activated during certain musical tasks.
And that research had already been done.
And that had been done, and we would just read,
Okay.
and we'd say, oh, this is a great article, and it really answers some of the questions that we want to know on this level. And then the next level was looking more at musical tasks and non-musical tasks, and if there were any similarities between the two. So when we memorize something outside of music, is it similar to how we memorize music or something in music? So we started making these kind of connections.
And is it similar?
Yes, well, there's a lot of things that are very similar, and there are a lot of things that we can do with music and using some of its, you know, the gestalt patterns and some of the natural things that our brain does when we hear music. We could use those to actually learn non-musical information. So the third step is looking at how music can influence the non-musical, or if it can even. So we've already looked at research. Are there parallels? Now, if there are parallels, can music actually be used in some way to influence that non-musical? So for instance, with walking, we had healthy people walk to rhythm to see if any changes happened. And we saw there were changes in their muscle activity. There were changes in some of the parameters of their gait that we talked about, like velocity and stride length and cadence. So it was interesting to see even people who were walking normal were being influenced by this. The last step then was to look at, okay, does it work with Parkinson's? Does it work with stroke? Does it work with people who have problems with walking or problems with whatever behavior it is? Can music still influence that task? For someone who has a hard time memorizing things or remembering things, can music somehow be used to help them remember?
About a year and a half, I would say, of pretty intense analytical work. We had 16 techniques identified. And we handpicked 20 friendly people to come to CSU, and we said, we're going to do this prototype training institute in neurologic music therapy. That's when we coined that term. You tell us if this is nonsense. And they were all extremely, extremely excited. That was the first institute, February 1999.
The notion of brain plasticity was not yet quite...
It was definitely an idea that people talked to, but it was not as understood. The amount of brain plasticity wasn't really
So this is just an
yet.
amazing confluence of timing.
People started having more and more access to brain scanners, and everybody wanted to do neuroscience research. And music is a fun topic to explore. And so a lot of neuroscientists were looking at music and the brain, and it was a really exciting time to be a part of that. And sometimes people look at you and they're like, music therapy, you don't really know anything about this. And it actually, going to the neuroscience conferences and interacting with some of these neurologists and neuropsychologists and just listening to their stories and realizing how much knowledge that we have as music therapists that they don't have. They might have the understanding of the brain, but it's a really nice combination to put together.
The model of NMT, I think, is well established, and we have an Academy of Neurologic Music Therapy, which sort of handles the training.
Playing something right away, but set the structure for yourself. Do the movement with us. And you could turn it into the Charleston, so forward, back, and the other leg. So you start bringing it.
For years and years, we did 2 training sessions in Colorado only, and now we're doing 5 to 6 all over the world.
On the leg up, planet, and then they go to stand up and they're kind of leaning over their walkers or their posture is really bad. So you guys knew that we were going to do another repetition because I went and gave that little cue. So if you're finding something's not working quite right, try to add it to participatory beat.
Through a combination of plenary lectures, table discussions, and small group demonstrations, participants at these training institutes are introduced to the latest research, learn about the applications of specific NMT exercises, such as gait training, and demonstrate them in small groups, receiving feedback from Academy instructors and other participants.
Squish the butt and bring it back.
Neurologic music therapy is practiced around the world, and rigorous professional requirements must be maintained for a therapist to remain rostered in the Academy.
Colorado State was basically the font for making this neurologic connection. That wasn't happening anywhere else.
No, it was really, it started there. And yes, people all over the world became very interested.
Pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Music therapists work to develop an ability that their clients previously did not have.
NICU music therapy has always been my passion. Music therapy in general is using music to address everyday goals and objectives. Here specifically, we like to work on pain management, feeding facilitation and feeding behavior, as well as stabilizing heart rate and oxygen saturation. They're very fragile, and they're not supposed to be out of the womb. And there's so many things happening to them as far as, they're hooked up to things, tests need to be done, possible CPAP or oxygen, and all these things that are necessary in order to keep them safe and alive. Here, it's single room NICU, which is fantastic, but it is very quiet.
Oh, hi, buddy.
What they're finding in the research now is that with single room NICUs, their language development is decreased and their motor skills are decreased, just because they aren't getting enough stimulation. Therapy comes in from a standpoint of being able to give positive stimulation, and when you have positive stimulation like that, the neural development is significantly greater. There are studies that show that babies in the NICU have a smaller brain volume than term babies, and music therapy helps with that, just because it helps the brain to develop. I'm constantly looking for signs of overstimulation, because we do not want the baby to be overstimulated. Then everything we've done basically goes out the window. I'm constantly looking for certain crying behaviors, what we call halt hand, where they literally put their hand up like this, and splay fingers and things like that. And if I see those, then I back off immediately. Baby Silas has just started to get music therapy. At about 28 weeks, I started going in. When I came in, his oxygen sats were really great. His respiration rate got better. He's so young that right now, guitar would probably be too overstimulating. We also like to work with mom and dad, giving them a sense of control in the NICU. So we created what we call a song of kin. It's a song that they start to sing to their baby when things are nice and calm. And then as the baby starts to get older and more used to the song, it becomes like a conditioned stimulus. Today he was really fussy because he wanted his milk. And so we started singing the Song of Kin to try and get him to remember, oh right, this is the time when I calm down. And it worked pretty well. He was really hungry. I used the Gato box, which is a major third, and it simulates the heartbeat. It's also really great for sucking behavior. And so what I do is I pace with him when he's sucking. I start out, each suck, I tap the Gato box, and I entrain with him. And then as he's going, he starts to entrain with me so that I can get him to pace and suck, swallow, breathe. He's really been having a lot of trouble with breathing when he's eating, and he did really great with pacing today. It also just kind of reminds them, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be eating. And you heard me kind of do the sound. That's also a reminder of we're eating now, because a lot of times sucking is a really comforting thing for babies, so they tend to fall asleep. So it's always nice for them to be reminded, okay, time to finish your whole bottle. And that's a big goal for us, because that's how they gain weight and how they get home. They can't go home until they learn how to eat.
The last 10 years or so, I've developed this sort of specialty area of improving literacy skills through music. It's the building blocks for literacy that comes even before using letters to read. It's phonological awareness. So it's playing with sounds. It's rhyming. It's taking a song like Yankee Doodle and putting the B in front of all the words, Banky, Boodle, Ben, Boop, Out, and that's kind of like childhood things that a lot of us did. It's being able to just like take a word like star, and then if you put it with another word, fish, you get a new word, and it's starfish. And that's things that are important building blocks for literacy that all has to develop just auditorily before you even see letters. And a lot of kids are missing that these days. It's I'm sure partially because of screen time. A lot of it's because so many kids are having so many ear infections at a young age, and we don't really know why, but that interferes at a critical point in their development. If they're not hearing sounds, they're not able to develop this skill of phonological awareness. And then there's all of the kids on the autism spectrum who are, most of them, so tuned into the visual that they're not really picking up on the auditory. So what I've done is taken all these phonological awareness skills and written songs to like explicitly teach each level of the skills. Because most kids just kind of pick this up by osmosis. They don't really have to be taught it, it just sort of happens. But when kids miss that for whatever reason, if it's because they have autism or their ears were not hearing what they should have been hearing, then you can go back and teach the skills really explicitly. And if you do it through music, it's just more fun, it's more memorable. It requires less repetitions because they're having fun.
And more of the brain is firing.
Right, yep, exactly.
Nate is on the autism spectrum. He's completely nonverbal. He has been with me for several years. Nate has a lot of anxiety. One of the techniques through NMT is the associative mood and memory training. With Nate, I'm not really using that technique at all to elicit memories from him. I am trying to elicit a change in his mood because sometimes he comes in very stressed out, very anxious. I can always tell when he's really ramped up, when he's anxious. When he comes in, sometimes it takes him a long time just to even settle in the chair. When I first started working with him, he had some aggressive behaviors when he felt really cornered, and I've learned to read his behaviors, and I've learned to read what his mood is when he comes in. That day, his mother told me he had not had a good night, and that happens often where his sleep schedule gets off. I wouldn't say he was overly anxious, and I wasn't worried about any of the negative behaviors that he used to exhibit. His breath, the rate of his breathing is the other thing that I usually pay very close attention to. Sometimes his breathing is very loud and it sounds like he's getting anxious. Sometimes he holds his breath. He used to do that quite a lot, and now I don't see that quite as much. But he'll and I don't know if that's his way of trying to kind of bring things back down or trying to control what's going on. By just holding his breath sometimes, I'm like, come on, it's okay, you can breathe, breathe with me. I pay very close attention to his rate of breath. The other things that I'm working on with him are usually all in the realm of music sensory orientation training. So MSOT is an NMT technique that I use to target different sensory things. And for him, what I want him to do is engaged in the world around him and not be so locked into what's going on inside of his own head, but to engage in the musical instruments I put in front of him, like the drums, the xylophone, things like that are things that I'm looking to elicit him to participate that way. The day that you were there, by the end, I think he was breathing in a very normal rate at certain periods and almost got so sleepy it looked like he was going to fall right asleep. And I think that, being ramped up for the last couple of days, not having a lot of sleep. But the music is what can do that for him. It can bring him from these states of agitation down to relaxed. There. Good. We're done. Get good feedback from Mom about when he left the sessions, it carried over. He was able to go home and sleep. You're getting tired on me, huh? So Jamie is another one of my private clients. She's an adult with autism, and we have been working for a long time on a lot of the musical attention control training techniques. So the MACT techniques are changing her dynamic cues, I'm changing her tempo cues, I'm changing the meter. She loves to dance. She was enjoying the scarves quite a lot because she likes the movement of the scarves. She's starting to look to me for cues to start, cues to stop, and I'm using different cues that I give her musically to see what she's paying attention to and what parts of the music she can attend to.
Faster. Ready? Get set. Go!
For a long time, it was hard to get her to even match my tempo. So to get her to play in rhythm to what I was doing, usually I would let her start and then I would join her and I would match the tempo she was at so she could feel what it was like to play in tempo with something, because a lot of times she was totally in her own world and she would just go ahead and play along, and she would start before I did and play, and then I would sing something along with her, and when I stopped she would still keep playing, and she didn't engage and didn't like connect with me as a music maker. Like in that session, we weren't looking at each other as like, you know, reading each other, and that is slowly emerging.
Okay, should we do it with the guitar?
She has a hard time going from 4 into 3, and we've been working on that for quite a long time. 1, 2, 3, 1.
And when I hit the guitar, you have to be on this star, because this star is number 1, right? 1, 2, 3.
I try to cue the 3s in so many different ways. I can point, she follows the point really well. But if I fade the point out, it's hard for her to find that internally, like a beat of 3 internally, so she falls back on the 4. Well, she'll still play like, oh, there's a sticker here, and there's a sticker there, and there's a sticker here. So she plays 1, 2, 3, and then she waits. 1, 2, 3, goes back to the beginning, bum, bum, bum. So she's playing on the 3 targets that I've given her, but internally she still is functioning in a 4 because it takes her so long to go from 3 to 1 that there's a whole beat that goes by.
Strong is number. Now lift your toes up and do the front.
She also has some OCD things going on, and she gets stuck in routines where she can't stop herself. It becomes very difficult to live with somebody who has to finish these routines before they can move on and do something else. It gets in the way sometimes of daily living.
Lift the toes, don't forget those. Toes, heels, heels, and lift your toes.
She gets into these patterns, especially like the foot tapping thing. Like she can't turn it off, or she has to do it like 12 times before she can stop. And so I'm trying to interrupt that and get her to stop and follow my cue instead of her internal cues. And that's all attention control training.
We were making a list of animals because we were going to use the animals to make a story, right?
Max is on the autism spectrum, and I've been working with him for several years.
And a monkey, and an elephant, and a whale.
He has some OCD issues, and he gets stuck in these patterns sometimes where he can't break out of it, or he has to follow a routine through from beginning to end before he can go on. And if he makes a mistake, he goes back to the beginning and starts it over.
Beak.
Beak.
What else does an owl
His
need?
mouth is here.
This song exercise where he drew an animal on a piece of paper and then we like paired it with a musical phrase. Started out, I wanted him to talk to me about his day at school. He had some frustrations at school that were kind of, when stress is high, when frustrations are high, then you see the patterns like get more rigid. Sometimes I tried to get him to talk to me about, so what happened at school today? How did your day go? And he didn't like to talk about what happened at school. He has a really difficult time expressing emotion or just identifying even with emotion. Like he never saw himself as a person that felt anger or felt frustration or felt scared. Like he wouldn't acknowledge that he had those emotions.
Okay. This is going to be a song about your animals. What's the title going to be?
Over the last several months, I've been kind of like working with him on different storytelling kinds of aspects. And when he was doing the animals, he likes animals. He likes to find out about animals. He likes the facts about the animals. We had been writing notes about all these different animals and how they're communicating with each other. Dolphins chirp and squeak. Yeah, that's a communication. And like just to even put those two ideas together, you know, it was kind of a process for him.
That live in the
Snakes
jungle.
are reptiles.
Snakes are reptiles. So you have some reptiles and some mammals.
we drew all the animals out and paired them with the musical phrases, and what you got a glimpse of was one portion of like this whole bigger hierarchy that we're kind of building out.
Add more to this.
Okay, and if you ever want to change any of these other things, we can do that too.
And eventually what we can do is like give these animals some emotions and like express them musically and play loud and fast for the angry animals that are feeling frustration, and like, oh, these animals are feeling very calm, or this is a joyful sound, and which animal is feeling joyful. COMA is a symbolic communication through music, and that technique is targeting very specific communication skills. And with Max, he doesn't really have a hard time communicating. He talks and communicates what's going on in his head fairly well. For him, that exercise was more of an executive function kind of a task, because what he needed to do is draw the animals and choose a color for each one and choose an instrument that paired with each picture. I gave him full reign to kind of choose any instrument in the entire room, but he only wanted to work with the boomwhackers, so we set everything up with the boomwhackers. But as we explore the emotional range of these animals, I'm hoping he can break away from just boomwhackers and like include some of the other instruments as well.
I'm not in the business of curing anybody. I'm not sure I'm in the business of healing people either, though. I think I'm in the business of helping. I think I'm in the business of easing. I think I'm in the business of being. Certainly there is a healing aspect to it. I don't use the word healing all the time when I talk about music therapy. I'm certainly not curing anybody. We go in and out of wellness. Wellness is now defined very differently than it ever was. You know, wellness is living the life you want to lead given who you are. And if that means you're living with a cancer diagnosis and need treatment, or if it means you're an individual who's diagnosed on the autism spectrum, that's who you are and where you are in any point of time. You know, that whole wellness piece changes for all of us. I'm in the business of meeting people where they're at and helping them. I think it's more coping, easing, being, facilitating.
This time when you take a breath in, I want you to throw that sound across the room.
Some of our folks signed or had expressive movement.
Okay, one more breath in.
But I think one of the big things was that a lot of our folks could vocalize. So we would get a lot of ahs and oohs and those sort of things. And the facial expression, which was just fabulous, that they were so engaged with us and so proud of being on stage. We really had high expectations for the kids. We didn't dumb down the music. We did a lot of Bach tunes, right up to pop tunes.
Christ is born. Oh, Christ is born. Yeah, that's what we're saying.
One of our singers was basically nonverbal, but had these beautiful vocalizations. And when she was so excited and joyful being on stage, they got bigger and louder, and it was fabulous. And we had a concert around, you know, the winter holiday time, and her mom came up to us afterwards, and she said to us, "I'm so sorry. She was so disruptive." And we were just like, no, she was participating fully and added to the group, and it was fabulous. And Mom looked at us and said, "Nobody's ever said that to me before." Anytime this child had been in the traditional public schools, anytime they participated, they were like, "Oh, we can't have you in this group. You're too disruptive." And she was always removed and then not allowed to have any of this opportunity. So that was a real eye-opener for us.
Oh, my mistake. Oh, is it all right to make a mistake? It happens, no big deal.
There are ways for children to express and to participate that might not look and sound the same, but it is full participation.
Gloria Domino. Say that. Gloria Domino.
If you look at the kids on the autism spectrum,
Big, huge areas for them are social skill development and communication. Whatever way and form that means, if it's by pictures or a switch or sign language or whether it's using their voice, then that's what we're going to be working with. But we got to know what that carryover is outside of the music situation. We're always working on things like taking turns, patiently waiting, sharing. It's very concrete and obvious to me if someone, can transition from activity to activity and how long it takes them to do it. And is there a behavioral piece that's happening when we're moving from one thing to another? How many vocalizations is, Johnny using in this session? Because, when he's not in music, he's not using any. But in music, we see that. And then we work collaboratively and cooperatively with the classroom teachers as much as we can.
I don't get nervous, but I don't believe that usually have a concert best thing, and yes, I do. What's your favorite police song?
Walking on the Cribbage Key. I like it. That's a good song.
You just enjoy the scene.
Wow, that was really good.
At Laremont School, all the music teachers are board-certified music therapists.
They feel very strongly at the administration level that they want somebody who's a music therapist to be working with our special children.
All right, but now we're going to sing Hello Song. Hello.
It was in the music therapy that I learned about the special needs and all the different varieties and then how best to adapt. I think that's probably one of the biggest things is how do you adapt things so that they can participate.
Hello. 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 Good job. Hello,
That's our job, to make it accessible for all of them. I don't feel that if you've gone through with just the music education that you have that extra special training. We have a program called Unique Curriculum here.
Transportation.
And I have been asked to reinforce also those curriculum-based activities that the students are learning on a monthly basis, incorporate them into the music activities that we would be doing.
We can take a train.
Because of the group settings, most of what we are doing in the music therapy sessions have to do with general goals based on what they might be learning in that grade level.
You try all aboard.
Last month we were talking at the primary level about using a map to find your way, and also what types of transportation could move people from place to place. And so a lot of the activities we were doing in music related to that. We had songs about trains, buses, cars, planes.
Do you want more? Good, using your words.
We did I'm going on a bear hunt, and had a map of how we would go from place to place to find the bear. It's a call and a response sort of thing. I'm going on a bear hunt, and then the student responds, I'm going on a bear hunt. We're going to catch a big one, and then it's the student's turn. We're going to catch a big one, sort of that echo and back and forth. So all that can also be recorded. There's a lot of ways that we can include everybody. One of our activities in music had to do with how do people celebrate with their family or friends during this particular time of year. I had visuals for the students to choose from if they needed some ideas of how they would be participating with their families.
What is that? Can you use your words? Good, Christmas tree. Good job.
But then for those who needed it, those were pre-recorded with that visual, and then there was a place in the song that was for their turn to give their response. I try to do a lot of that sort of thing, you know, writing different songs for the students to be able to actively participate. Music therapy is not specifically on the IEPs, but I am working in conjunction with speech and OT and PT and trying to reinforce those things in music. Whether the student says it verbally, or whether they have an iPad that they use, if they have a core board they carry with them. If they're gesturing with visuals. In music, we're very clear to make sure that each child has an opportunity to communicate in their own unique way. Just yesterday, a very nearly nonverbal student said something. We heard 3 words during a music therapy session that nobody has ever heard them say before. The other staff were just astounded too, sort of taken aback. Oh, did he really say that? And then not 2 minutes later, then he said something else, and it was directly related to the activity. And this is a little guy who just doesn't say anything.
The Milwaukee Center for Independence looks specifically for neurologic music therapists.
That is the evidential and educational background that we want. It really does set a very high standard, and it's very difficult to achieve.
So you gotta lead me. So if you want me to stop, you gotta show me how to stop. If you want me to follow you, show me how to follow you. Fast, slow, loud, soft.
My day is very weird. I have large groups and small groups. I have individual contracts. I have in-home care. I've got working adults in the professional setting, and I see folks at home in medical care settings. I've got the range of people. And so a range of music has been very helpful. What makes music effective? Well, the number one thing I found is preference. Your style is effective. Whether it's rock or hip hop or classical or indie or whatever, I don't care. Your style, your preference, that's what works.
Find something you want me to play, okay? And then you're gonna teach me that part.
So a live music therapist can play indie or rock and respond quickly and change and challenge and support. A CD is it's done. You can't fix it. There's no adapting it. You're stuck. That's it. There's no flexibility. Sometimes we need to totally change. We need to respond and do something like relaxation. We need to do something like crisis management and just totally shift gears.
You got it? Okay, so you got a plan?
I got a plan.
You got a plan. All right, hit me.
Okay.
What am I doing?
Being very, very flexible and responding to what you get is how you get past tough clients. We have some people who hate music therapy. Totally fine. We have some people who love it and couldn't live without it. So accepting people that at their personality level, knowing that there's an actual person there and responding to that, that immediately sets the tone. So if I've got someone who is refusing or really just after me, does not want to do this, stop. There's no reason, stop. One of the great things about music therapy is it's at will. You know, the client can say stop, and we're done. It's totally fine. You know, this isn't court ordered. No one's forcing them to come here. This is absolutely great and beneficial to them, and they see it and they buy into that, and that's fantastic. They don't have to be here. So I allow clients to have that. So when I have someone who is aggressive, someone who is having a crisis moment, who is just behaviorally not appropriate to be in a room with a $600 drum, we don't. We go somewhere else, we do something different, we adjust. That's the glory in music therapy, is that it's not all one technique. It's not just this thing. If this doesn't work, we have other, all the way to let's build a guitar.
What are some of those notes, like or in terms of time? Quarter note, half note. What are you putting in there?
I have no idea. That's the only reason I have.
That's okay. I have no idea what works for me.
We're looking at long-term goals, the ability to independently, you know, use these skills on their own. So we're primarily, anytime you get into cognitive skills, you start with attention. That is the core of everything. If you don't have a foundation of attention, you're not getting anywhere. And then we break it down and we look at different types of attention and we work our way up. And then we use an executive function task where we're looking at how we incorporate all that in together in one very complex cognitive task.
You just accomplished lesson 1 through 4, all rolled into one.
And then we go into music psychotherapy and counseling, where we look about what's the meaning of that. Not just we did it, that's good, why? And relate it meaningfully to them.
What's that very first note? Do we see that anywhere over here?
That's a quarter note.
Very good, quarter note, that's the rhythm. What note is it?
We use music attention control training. We talk about what is sustained attention. We talk through the whole thing. We use the same terms. I don't sugarcoat anything. It's the same thing I would use for any working professional as I would for someone in the hospital. I treat them all the same, and I treat them just like you.
Music therapists work to maintain the abilities of people with degenerative conditions, such as Parkinson's and other neurological diseases, for as long as possible.
I'm the founding chair of the music therapy department at Berklee College of Music. I was very interested in providing interventions that could be easily accessible for people who themselves were chronically ill. So I did a randomized control trial with individuals who were homebound. These people had moderate to major depression and had anxiety that also exacerbated their depression. They were referred to me because they couldn't be treated with traditional means. So the intervention was one where I helped people design playlists to induce relaxation based on their own history and taught some very simple techniques. One was focusing on the breath, breathing with the music, letting the music cue the rhythm. Another was a progressive muscle relaxation. I actually made home visits with 1/3 of these participants in the research, and I taught them the techniques. I went through their collections of music. We created the playlist. We practiced together. And in another group, randomly assigned, this group, because I thought that my physical presence might alone be a support for depressed people, I knew I had to control for that. So the second group actually did these techniques and on their own created their playlists. I spoke with them on the telephone once a week. They never met me. They never knew what I looked like. And I just advised them, gave them some feedback about how to look for more music for these particular techniques. They agreed to practice on their own. And then I had a control group that did not participate in any music therapy intervention. At the end of 8 weeks, the people who had experienced either of the music therapy conditions, with me or without me, both made significant gains on self-reports of depression, distress, and anxiety, and improved on a self-esteem inventory. The control group made no such gains. But what was particularly interesting was that 9 months after the completion of the study, those people who were in the music groups continued to use music in their lives, and their depression kept going down, particularly in the group where I did not visit them.
Really?
And they learned on their own to create these playlists, to manage these techniques, to teach themselves with a little bit of support. And that was the group that did best 9 months later.
I know some young people who just routinely listen to really dark music.
Yes.
That has to have a counterproductive psychological effect, wouldn't it, based on what your findings were?
It definitely does. However, in the hands of a skillful music therapist, the therapeutic process that is opened up by experiencing that music together, talking about that music, really beginning to hear how dark a place that individual is, that adolescent is. That's something that few therapeutic tools can open up so instantly. This is an immediate way for someone to understand what that teen is going through. And to question the lyrics and to question that pounding rhythm, that angst in the singer, and to say, is that how you feel? And invariably it opens up yes or no or whatever it is. But the music is there, and that's why they can become riveted to that music. And listening to that music over and over again may indeed cause more feelings of anger, aggression, distress, for sure.
Perseverate.
Yes, yes, and it's easy to perseverate because you are entrained by this music, and your physiology becomes dependent on that driving rhythm. And so being able to gradually slow that down with the trusted relationship of a music therapist who knows the music, who can play along and have you then play along and improvise off this music to create your music, and then to slowly move into music that's more how you would like to be and how you are with your dearest friend. That is the process that begins a psychological change, a mood change at the least, an insight at its greatest level, self-actualization, a sense of flow, a sense of transcendence. Music is capable of doing this when we find that music that really speaks to us. And so when that happens, the brain is going wild with imagery, with memory, with all of those emotional changes in the limbic system that are counteracting fear and anxiety, but giving a sense of peace. And we see the neurochemicals also very active in bringing serotonin and dopamine when we're just thrilled to hear a piece of music that we know well. It makes us feel good. Music does sort of bathe us in this environment. In fact, we can't close our ears to it. And we all know intuitively that music affects us. But the music therapy model that I use is one whereby people become fully aware of the impact. That inner musician, it's something we don't pay attention to, particularly if we've been told that we can't sing or we shouldn't sing, or we're so intimidated by the artist and the performer on stage. We don't get to really look at our innate talent, our creativity. And these women with cancer, one of them said, I never thought I'd look forward to going to chemotherapy. So it obviously had impact. And when I looked pre-post session, there were changes in heart rate, there were changes in a visual analog scale that I used to ask them, how is your pain? How is your comfort? How is your contentment? And all of those things changed quite significantly, as you can imagine. We transformed the experience of being a patient in an infusion unit to being a musician and discovering my talent and giving me an expressive outlet that not only reminds me of who I am, but transcends who I thought I was.
Expanded from being a patient with a central focus to being human with a much more transcendent focus.
Yes, being human in every aspect of human potential.
Sarah Johnson, who's a music therapist, was up on the rehab floor, and she was doing amazing things. I saw very quickly how much improvement, once you add the music with walking patterns, really helped those clients. And then I met Dr. Michael Tout shortly thereafter, and he had asked me to participate in some research, and so I started doing some of the work with the research on the early stroke and Parkinson's studies. In the community group that we run now, there's a large group of people that have certain deficits that may make it hard for them to work at a gym or with a yoga or exercise program somewhere else, that they just need a little extra help, or their balance challenges are such that it wouldn't be good for them to be in that type of group. We're not so much working on their walking pattern because logistically that's hard to do with a group and be safe. So I think community groups are huge and that we're going to see more and more of them. I hope we see more and more that are NMT community groups. It can be a forever thing because we're trying to keep them healthy through their life. And this is something that they can do where they feel comfortable, it keeps them hooked in. We've had people in here for over 10 years.
Okay, your feet should be back under you. Let's do one more where we do the 4, and then we'll do some just repeats. 2.
What we're doing with the community exercise group is really working on movement patterns and using some of the other techniques of music therapy, the PSE, the pattern sensory enhancement, to really guide the movement patterns. My goal during these groups is to get improved range of motion, improved strength through trunk, upper extremities, lower extremities. The ultimate goal is to improve their function. So improve their walking ability, improve their stability with standing activities, decrease their risk of falls, improve their ability to do whatever they like to do, dance or golf or go have fun. And I think it makes a huge difference for these folks to have this weekly group and be exercising.
Nice and tall position. Again, ears over shoulders. Think about keeping those abs engaged. We're going up on toes and down. Up on toes.
Many times they will not do their program at home because they feel isolated. This gets them out. It gets them in a community group. It gets all the use of the music therapy techniques to help them gain their strength and range of motion, their balance.
Do you encourage them to sing along? Or
Yeah. Then they're breathing too. That's a huge thing. So you probably heard me saying, okay, take a breath, and a lot of them are holding their breath, and that's just kind of, unfortunately, when we exercise, when I'm working with people in the clinic, a lot of times they're holding their breath. So when they're singing, they're breathing. Some of them don't want to do a lot of reaching, or they avoid certain things at home because they know their balance is going to be challenged with those things. So if we repetitively practice those things and they see and hear, okay, I can do that, I'm getting better with my balance, then they're going to do more things at home and feel safe with doing that. I don't want to put them at risk, but to practice those things actually helps improve their balance and decrease their fear. I'm watching them like a hawk to make sure everybody's safe, because fear is a huge thing. They'll restrict their movements at home because of fear. So if we can challenge them in here and they know they're safe, we're lucky we have students, so we make sure everybody's safe in here, but allow them to challenge themselves. I feel very lucky that I am able to work with neurologic music therapists. To be involved with the continuing education, having students here. I can't imagine doing the type of community groups that I do without using neurologic music therapy. So it's been huge. Our clients love it, but it's also because it's so effective that I can't imagine not using that.
And we do huge drum interventions with folks living with Parkinson's. What was really interesting for me was that we did music therapy right before lunchtime. And so the nursing staff reported that feeding had become much more independent for a number of the folks, and that it was faster and more efficient. So swallowing was improved. the ability to chew and really move. But again, for some, they were able to independently feed a bit better, and others that time was faster, because often it can be a very long, drawn-out process. And so those were things that we obviously don't see in the music session, but the fact that it happened on those days, we're only in there once a week. It wasn't happening on those other days.
Eve also provides music therapy for patients with dementia at a memory care unit.
A woman who was coming faithfully to the group, and we'd seen a pretty rapid decline of her ability to really stay within the moment and be focused. She was living with Alzheimer's, and her communication had pretty much ceased. And her husband, Joe, came faithfully to this group. He was there all the time, and it was hard for him. You could see it. You could hear it in his voice, because she just didn't recognize him. And so there had been a couple weeks where there had been really no recognition for her of Joe in the music setting or anywhere else. And we were doing a piece, we were all drumming. They actually were asked to share a drum. So they had a large frame drum between the two of them, each holding it, each had a mallet. And we were playing a rock and roll piece, something from the 50s. I don't even remember what it was, but we were jamming out to it. And when it finished, she turned to Joe and she said, "Joe, how nice to see you. Where have you been?" And they started up a conversation. He's crying. I'm, just about there with him. But it was that moment that I was like, yeah, this is such a gift. It's a gift for Joe. His wife is well taken care of, and she's not in pain, and she hasn't shown huge anxiety, and she's comfortable in sort of where she's at and as her disease progresses. But Joe, her husband, he's the one who's really grieving and having the moments. And so for him, this was a gift. And it was totally the music. And there were staff people in the group who saw this too and were like, wow, this is so powerful. Those are the kind of things you work for. That's why you do it.
I had two daughters, Lauren and Hannah. When my oldest daughter, Lauren, was about 5 years old, she would get off the bus from kindergarten and absolutely collapse in a heap, crying and screaming every single day. We discovered from the school that she'd not passed her eye test. A pediatric ophthalmologist said she cannot see. She's not kidding you when she's looking at the eye chart that she can't see these things. And you need to go and see a neurologist. There was no genetic testing that could be done.
Bye.
But the neurologist, having seen this before, knew that she had juvenile neuronal ceroid lipofuscinosis, or Batten disease. Later, Hannah was tested, and she too had this degenerative brain disease. This is a progressive disease. It is fatal. Usually begins with the loss of vision around 5 years of age and progresses to the loss of speech, all purposeful motor function, and then started our quest to educate our two daughters. I had no idea of anything about music therapy, and I was astounded that there was this powerful and gentle thing that my children could use.
Lauren was starting to really, really struggle in the classroom environment. The group was just too much. Even though she wanted to be there, it was just overwhelming for her. So at that time...
The sensory issues?
Sensory-wise, yes. So at that time, she was being pulled out most of the time in a one-on-one situation. And so I said, well, she responds so strongly, can I just keep seeing her? And so I actually, and this isn't what most music therapists would probably recommend doing, but I was already there and I really knew she responded. So I just provided services for free for about a year. In the summer, I did summer music camps, which again was more of just an enrichment program because I wasn't doing documentation. So once the team was on board, Karen saw what it could do, all the other therapists saw how she responded in that situation with those strategies that I could teach the team to use throughout the week when I wasn't there. From that point, it was a lot easier to get the ball rolling.
Your arms up.
Music therapy could be married with any skill.
Yes.
You needed to keep going for as long as possible. We would do a lot of breathing exercises in music therapy, and then I could turn around and do those throughout the rest of the week until the music therapist came again. I couldn't take a CD and put it on and have it be the music, because you had to go at the pace the girls were at and be able to move them toward a normalized breathing pattern or speech.
The teachers had developed a song for her so that she could learn her telephone number. Not learn her telephone number because she knew her telephone number. She couldn't get it out. And the song would help to get it out.
With a degenerative disease, you have to look not only where you're at, but where that child is going, so that you try to work on what that child will need for their entire life and try to zone out on some things that won't be essential and focus more on things that they will need.
Most of the time when in music therapy, I'm giving kids a strategy and using music, but I'm always fading the music because I want them to be independent and to be able to function in the world without the music. With the girls, it was different because we had to train them to become dependent. They started out independent in this case, and they were gradually losing everything. So we had to give them tools to be successful, but kind of dependent on us.
How old is Lauren? 15. See it? You see this
Yes and no was a big thing, and just giving her the power to be able to make choices in her day was just a huge change in her quality of life, really.
How old are you? 13, but 20, I'm 15. I wanted to see if you were going to give me the true answer.
It was very important for her, and this is typical with most clients, that you start with the same song every time. Most music therapy literature will just call it your contact song. They hear that song, they know, okay, this is what we're going to do for this amount of time. We actually use that with all of the team. We asked each team member to choose one song that they would sing with her, because it really just kind of instantaneously put her in the right frame of mind to know what she was going to do.
And they each had their own song that they sang when they arrived.
We encouraged them to do that, yes. Some are more comfortable with others. The relationship that develops through the music is the most important thing. One of the big things was just being able to ask her, how are you today? Are you feeling well, or do you feel not so good? Hello, Lauren, how are you? She learned that hello song when we started together. Or like dog poop. 10 years later, those songs, even though her disease was quite advanced at that stage, those songs were still there. They were new memories when I taught them to her, and they had made their way into long-term memory. I either feel fine or I feel dog poop. It was very highly motivating for her to say that she felt like dog poop if she didn't feel well.
There was a lot of eavesdropping that went on. It was really funny, but again, they were at two totally different stages in the disease. So one would listen to the other very carefully and maybe be snickering or something at the time of what song. Especially Hannah thought it was hysterical that there was a dog poop song.
Oh yeah, that was naughty.
Yes, that was very naughty, she'd say. Yeah. I spent a lot of time, even though I'm not a singer at all, singing some of the songs to get one or both of them to calm, be less anxious, get out of a fearful spot, or to reset all the clocks in the brain that were going at all different speeds, making it impossible to either speak or even to tolerate a tiny sound going on in the room, and use the music rhythm to help get them back into the ability to function and to especially get out of really sad moods.
One-on-one time was really the only way that music therapy was going to be effective for them. And to have it like in the IEPs meant that the parents could count on the school to provide that service, and it wasn't going to be on their shoulders. Music therapy is one of those extras that doesn't very often get met at school. You know, the school budgets don't have room for individual music therapy, so that was a very unique situation, and I think the girls really benefited from it.
It empowered them to say, I want to go home. I'm hungry. I'm thirsty. Just the basic human needs. And when you are losing all these abilities, and yet your brain still knows what you need and want and why and how, you've got to be given some power back. And music empowers them.
When working with Hannah, allowing her to still say the word hello, because we figured out that the O was something she was really, really good at, and she still had. So we wanted to keep that for her as long as possible and use it as a way to interact with teachers, people who came by to visit, things of that nature. So there was a song that we used that also prompted the O and also prompted a smile at the end. It went something like, hello, and I'd wait on the O, because sometimes it would take a little while for it to form. Hello, and I'd wait, and I'd see the O, and I'd say, Hannah, I'm here with you today. Can you give me a smile? And then I'd wait. And we do it again. Hello, and then the second time through would come quicker. Hello, there's the O, and we all see it. There's no sound, but she's making the O. We're there, we're connected. I'm here with you today. Can you please give a smile? And then she'd give the little look, the impish look. And then we do it again. Then it becomes stronger a third time. Hello. Then the O is really there. Hannah, I'm here with you today. Can you give me a smile? Dink. And there's the smile. So that patterning right there gave us a way to connect, communicate, gave her a way to acknowledge, yes, I'm here with you. I see you. And thank you for acknowledging the way that I can communicate right now. And that was just awesome. I get little shivers still thinking about it, because other folks looking at someone like her in that state say, she's not verbal anymore, all the no's. She is verbal, just in a different way, and the music gives us a different way to access it, and it slows down time enough that I think we allow for the space for an individual to find the way they communicate. And for me as a therapist, it gives me the time, and music holds the space so that I can wait to observe and be really present with what they're able to do.
There were a lot of other focuses as well. The social piece with having her same age, non-disabled peers come in and allowing them to feel comfortable.
To be able to have other children of their own age, to be able to play with them and to interact with them. This was real engagement with everyone in the group, and they were all on an even par with it. It was wonderful to see. It was a wonderful gift.
The walking song is one we used a long time, and it kept her walking.
Hannah started to become more involved in her disease, and we were walking down the street, and there would be this wide gate, and all of a sudden she started singing a song that Kathy had used for gait training.
Walking, heel to toe.
I was amazed. She called it up out of herself. It was a tool that she had at her disposal. And that was amazing, because so many times when you have handicapped children, you're the one that has to take the tool out of the box and hand it to them. And my kids actually used the tools that they were given.
It's really, really critical that you assess the client to see where they're walking at to begin with. But if she's calling up the song herself, she's just going to do that intrinsically. It's subcortical, there's no processing. That's why the child responds, and the adult that's walking with the child can't help but walk at the same time.
When I first started to see Hannah, she would sing every word of her favorite songs with me. As her disease progressed, she was less and less capable of producing sounds. She didn't have the same control over her own voice, but we found ways to incorporate movement into a lot of the things that we did. We used PSE techniques to get her moving.
But the music helps us.
Some of her songs that she had were very specifically written to elicit these specific movements to help her transfer. We did a lot of therapeutic singing because that was such a strong skill that she held on to. Even when she wasn't able to walk anymore, she still would sing along, and she still could produce the sounds that were important to her communication. And when everything else started to go and you can't see anything and you can't really move anymore, to be able to express what's going on is really important. And for her too, like the sensory system got overloaded very easily. And so as she would get excited, it became harder to tell you what she needed to say or to communicate what she needed. And so sometimes the music really helped her just like to calm and come down a notch. And then she was not so overly excited and she could communicate better.
Good job.
Thank you.
The kids needed to have physical and occupational therapy. The school did not have therapists that could accommodate them, so we went outside and went to a private therapist. Very scary for my kids because they couldn't see and there was so much noise and there were other children or people being treated at the same time, and they really may not have understood what the therapist was going to do with them. And there were times when Lauren would just hug herself and say, "I'm so afraid." And it would just break your heart because here you were doing something that was going to help them and they were afraid. Music never frightened them. There was never anything that it demanded of them that they couldn't do or didn't want to do or
couldn't adapt to do.
Yes. Even as time went on and they were able to do less and less and less, when you would be doing these exercises that you develop, as soon as they would hear your voice, you could feel the body tightening for, this is what I have to get ready to do. Yeah. And it's like the switch went on inside. So often, all of the neurologists and the people who study this disease say that basically you have a vegetative child. They weren't vegetative. It's like, put your hands on these kids and listen, feel what is happening. The disease outpaced all the other therapies, but the disease never outpaced music therapy. It was the last one that they were able to use. It is a lifeline for a drowning person when someone understands your child and can find joy in their day or in the moment with them. It just enriches everyone's life. They did not have a lesser life than anyone else. Mm-hmm. No. They had grand lives.
Mm-hmm. And they taught me lots of new music.
Me too. Me too.
Music therapists work to restore abilities that their clients previously had but lost because of a traumatic injury of some sort. This goal often includes finding a new normal.
How did you first become interested in a more global aspect and specifically then your work with the child soldiers?
In 2007, I met Samate Mulando, who is a Ugandan refugee who runs Musicians for World Harmony, which is a nonprofit organization that specifically goes to Africa and uses music for health and healing. Not called therapy, but health and healing. And he was really looking at how music can be used in a more clinical way. There was a student currently at Berkeley who had traveled with him on a trip with her mother and others to Kenya to look at how working with children with HIV, homelessness, and she came back to Berkeley and said, "We've got to put a trip together to take students to Africa." So that was the beginning for me of really looking at how do we then take our music and our theory, and we put a trip together. We traveled to Africa in 2007 and worked with all different kinds of children. In 2013, Samate came back and said to me, "Karen, I'd like to bring you to Africa to run a feasibility study to see how music can be used for reintegration for ex-child soldiers into society. And I'd like to see if we can work together to partner with performance and therapy." So I went in February of 2013 and we worked with ex-child soldiers, counselors, staff, and families. And the results were immediate. They had counselors who had been working with children
all day long. When my friends
and for 3 months they had difficulty getting them to open up to talk. With one session of music, students and the child soldiers were able to open up. For me, it was really about making music together as a group and then being able to talk about the experience. And so music was incredibly accessible, especially in a culture where music is part of everyday life. And from there, we started working not only with the children, but also with the counselors to help them use techniques of live music making, mindful meditation, relaxation, and different kinds of music approaches, blending both African music and traditional Western music as a tool to help kids begin to really communicate with each other, communicate with the counselors, and then begin to really express some healing aspects of music. There's this thing called toxic compassion, where you go, the person who's going feels great, and missions and churches and synagogues, they all go and they do this wonderful work, but sometimes you could do more harm than good, thus the word toxic compassion. One of the things that Samate and I talk about is you have to be careful when you're using music, because you're going to open people up emotionally. So to me it was sustainability. How do we keep the energy, the theory, the work, the relationship, the partnership going? And we started Skyping on a weekly basis. Technology is amazing. You can sit under a tree in Africa and have a modem and communicate with people anywhere in the world. And that's what we started doing. We had latency problems with the technology and the connectivity, but we started sharing music. And the idea of music therapy is always about relationship and exchange. We made a class where we then were able to, on a weekly basis, have students share their music with the people in the community in Africa.
So it's a class here at Berkeley.
It was actually Dr. Peggy Cotting's class that was a research class that started looking at the effects of trauma and how music therapy could address those issues. And so we developed a pretty long relationship where on a weekly basis the students would put music together to share. We talk about the theory of music therapy. We'd share some meditation, and then they would share their music with us and teach us their dancing. So for me, it was a perfect relationship in terms of exchange.
What we're doing with the community exercise group is really working on movement patterns and using pattern sensory enhancement. I do take their O2 saturation, we take blood pressure every time they come in. If somebody's running high for a few weeks in a row, I'll say, why don't you go back and check with your physician? Or somebody's O2 sat has been dropping when they've been exercising, I'll have them check with their physician. They may be compromised. And I just want to make sure they're safe with exercise. But we see these folks improving strength, they're improving their range of motion, but their endurance also too, and their cardiovascular is challenged. We try and keep going with that standing exercise. I mean, we're up and standing, hopefully 10, 15 minutes, and we're working them, and they're plugging along, and we see the improvement. I want them to be as independent as they can be. Same thing with doing the exercises. I don't want the students to do too much for them. Coming in, coming out. Everybody's great. They'll help each other get their coats on. People are asking, where is so-and-so? There's this community bond that builds doing a group like this, which is nice. They want to come back. They want to participate in the group.
Traumatic brain injuries may result in complex linguistic changes. Dysarthria refers to a group of motor speech impairments that result from damage to the neurological areas that control the muscles used for speech. Due to this damage, muscles of the tongue, lips, and face don't respond in the normal way, and speech often becomes quiet, slurred, or unintelligible. Oral, motor, and respiratory exercises have been developed to strengthen the muscles necessary for communication.
Können Sie noch mal probieren zu pusten, wie beim Kerze auspusten?
Again, Dr. Tout.
This gentleman is being asked to breathe, and he has some very weak respiratory functions, and there's very little output.
Gut. Okay. Wir müssen zu. Noch so ein bisschen. Ja.
And he's gone through neurologic music therapy training, trying to practice breathing in music with using neurologic music therapy technique.
Die Lippen sind geschlossen. Hier.
For instance, playing the harmonica, which is a very good instrument to work on that.
Ganz normal atmen jetzt. Normal atmen.
He's trying to breathe. Okay, and that is after several sessions.
Dyspraxia refers to a disturbance in the ability to sequence spoken language. Despite normal muscle strength and sensation, the brain is unable to coordinate the complex motor actions required for speech.
Let's think how we fix that. All right, let's try this. I'm Peter.
Hi, Peter.
I'm Peter. What are you gonna say if you need to use the bathroom?
A-O-N.
I.
The bathroom.
Good.
Bathroom.
I need the bathroom.
Oh.
Use your hand.
The bathroom.
Good. Do you see how much of a difference that made just by you tapping this? Is this a pencil?
Yes.
Well, okay, that's confusing. I'm not gonna do that one. Is this red?
Yes. 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 No.
No. Is this a watch?
Yes.
Is this pink?
Yes. Yes. Oh.
No, I know what you're trying to say.
Oh.
So we're trying to just work on the actual words, and you're doing a really good job. And if I say, thank you, Peter, you can say, you're welcome. And then if somebody does something nice for you, you say, welcome. Thank you. Good. And how are you?
I am good.
And what's your name?
Peter.
Won't you blow? Time won't you blow your horn?
Hemispatial neglect often occurs after strokes and with some forms of dementia. It's called neglect because the patient is unaware of the deficit. Their imagination of physical space has gone on that side. It's not a sensory problem. There often is nothing wrong with the patient's eyes. It is a consciousness problem. This neglect affects memories as well. When asked to draw a daisy or a clock from memory, patients will fail to include details from the neglected side. Even though they know that a clock must have the numerals from 1 to 12, they cannot imagine populating the affected side.
So it's not necessarily a visual problem, but it's more of a cognitive problem where they don't have the awareness of the left side of their body. We have interventions that we use called music neglect training. With the optometrist, it's a very specific intervention that we do. He has a board that he can actually quantify the degrees of neglect prior to the NMT intervention and post the NMT intervention. So he'll do the assessment, pre-assessment that has nothing to do with music, it has nothing to do with NMT. We do the NMT intervention, and then he does the same assessment again at the end to see the carryover, because that's what we're about. It's great that somebody can do this while we're in an NMT session, but if they can't do it outside of the session, does it really matter that much? I use specifically handbells, where patients are actually playing melodies on a handbells from the right, forcing them to go to the left. How you do it? 1, 2, 3. So in order for them to complete the melodic phrase, they actually have to drive their attention to the left. Good job. Excellent, good. You can relax for a second. Your brain has worked hard right now. Oh. We had a patient who had had a stroke that affected his right side and severely affected his movement. He was getting traditional physical therapy 6 days a week for an hour of therapy a day. And he had had that therapy for 3 weeks. When I met him, he was walking with a cane at 60 steps per minute for about 45 feet before he fatigued. And he was very rigid and slow. Our very first neurologic music therapy session with him, we did rhythmic auditory stimulation. And at the end of that one session, he was walking twice as fast, 120 steps per minute, without a cane, and for 250 feet without stopping. So he quadrupled his distance, doubled his speed, and got rid of the cane in one 45-minute neurologic music therapy session. And now he's actually back to work part-time, he's driving, and we just actually got word last week that he's starting ballroom dance lessons with his wife.
The rapport between therapist and patient is crucial for achieving this kind of success, and it is based on trust.
Are you shooting us?
Just conversation. What kind of waffles do you like? The patient has a motor dysfunction due to, actually, she has a tumor in her brain that they had tried to remove, and they did surgery on her brain, and they had removed half of the tumor.
I know.
And then her blood pressure sort of went out of control, and they had to stop.
I wouldn't be doing my job if I wasn't, though. Oh, Nelly. That's the hardest part, huh?
She has problems with balance, with her symmetry of gait, so her one side doesn't take the same length of step as the other side. She shuffles quite a bit as well, and her initiation for turns is very hard for her. We quantified her baseline tempo using a metronome, so finding out how fast she actually walks at baseline. Today it was about 63 beats per minute. And then we started there. Then her brain was able to entrain to the beat, meaning she was able to actually anticipate when the next beat was coming and move her body accordingly. She did that very well, and we saw a difference immediately in her symmetry. So her right side and her left side became much more even, and she became more balanced by virtue of doing that. When she was going around the turn, her left foot sort of kept hitting. Entrainment helps to actually fire rhythm centers in her brain that can actually keep her body moving throughout the turn as well.
I also noticed that as the session progressed, you slowed down to match her.
So that was the first time we'd actually done obstacles with her. There was a number of things that were happening. One being it was new, and I think she could also tell she was fairly distracted. Two, it was the end of the session, and I think she was fatigued, which can have an implication for her ability to entrain if her body is tired. And so when I slowed down the tempo to sort of match her, the idea was sort of find out where she could do this at, so that we could still get the elements of the rhythm for balance, and then work on the improvement from there.
Some serious
Brian has been getting one-on-one music therapy with me for the last month. What I worked on in music therapy with him today was speech and singing. I don't ever want to feel. I was, targeting some of the quality pieces like volume and that gravelly, like it's kind of hard to understand him sometimes. Also the articulation of what he's saying. Sometimes it doesn't come out very clearly and you have to ask him to repeat. Yeah, good. When I was tapping on his knees, the rhythmic speech cueing is something I use to target articulation. When I tapped, it seemed like the gravelly stuff kind of went away. The rhythm of what he was saying was a little better, but the quality of his voice improved. Another side. At first, I started just working on coordination with his hands. So like this would be a timp, and that is using the instruments in a therapeutic way to get them to do anything that they functionally have to do. His left arm is weaker, and he doesn't have that same range. It doesn't have the same stamina. He can't go as long. Instead of holding it between your fingers, hold it like that and put your thumb on the top. Yes, just like that. When you're targeting that through timp, where I place the drum and how he has to reach for it and how he has to strike the drum, it's all looking for functional movement that he would use outside of a music therapy. At first he asked me to put them down low because that was easy for him. So we started down low and got him like in a rhythmic pattern, and when I lifted them up, it took him a little while to he had to really stop and think, and I kind of talked him through, turn your hand this way and lift it this way, because I was looking to get this motion. See, there you go. Towards the end of the session, as I gave him the snare drum, all of a sudden his voice improved, and I feel like that his voice got bigger and easier to understand when he was physically moving. Then all of a sudden his voice was better, like I saw improvements in all those speech goals. It was the first time that I had sat in on Brian's PT session, and it was also the first time that physical therapist and I worked together. Rhythmic auditory stimulation is using a steady beat and a metronome to trigger neurological firing so that things start firing together. It helps with coordination. Like first, 1, 2, 3. When he was doing his pre-gait exercises, so those were like the stepping exercises where he was stepping out and stepping forward. I was kind of playing today to see how he would respond to just the beat of a metronome, to see how that helped him coordinate his beat, and then once we added the music, I kind of turned the metronome off and used the guitar to create that rhythm and that pulse so that he still had some feedback that way, but it was more musical. He was animated and he was happy and smiling and in this really good mood and like really willing to work. Typically, he gets tired quicker than he did today. Typically, he might he actually lays down on the mat. She was telling me that there's a pillow on the mat table. Sometimes he's actually goes and lays down and needs to just take a break, take a rest. It's hard to get him to do another group of let's do 5 more. It's hard to keep him going. She says his focus is usually really difficult to keep him focused on one task at a time. And I didn't see any of that today. He was really focused. He wanted to keep going. He was like, no, let's do it again. The fluidity of his movement was better. He was a little bit more stable on his own and needed less support from her. Even at the very end, the walking, like you could see just from the difference from him walking into the room and then walking with the guitar was just like bigger strides and more fluid movement. His turns were smoother. One more? Okay, one more. His movement was more fluid. He had more flow. He had better control of what he was doing.
Did you like it?
Yeah.
I
love it. On January 8th, 2011, Representative Gabrielle Giffords was a victim of an assassination attempt near Tucson at this Safeway supermarket, where she was meeting with constituents. She was critically injured by a gunshot wound to the head. 13 others were injured and 6 were killed in the shooting. Giffords was later brought to Tier Ehrman Memorial Hospital, a rehabilitation facility in Houston. Megan Morrow was the music therapist on the team that helped Gabby to recover her ability to walk, speak, read, and write.
Melodic intonation therapy is my most used technique for those that are suffering with aphasia, any kind of problem in the left domain concerning the Broca's area. We start with singing. Let's say we're going to work on the phrase, go to bed. Go to bed. I can make up something like that really matches the same intensity that you would speak with. We will sing it with melody until they get it with me, and then we'll rhythmically chant it and fade it into regular speech. We try to set them up with very functional phrases that they can use at home.
Less than 7 months after the shooting, Gabby returned to the House of Representatives to vote.
In the rehabilitation setting, we're not necessarily healing you of everything that happened. There's going to be lesions on the brain still that we have no control over. What we do at TIER is really set you up for functional life. We try to get you as independent as you possibly can be and give you a new normal. It used to be thought, hey, that side of the body doesn't work anymore, so let's just forget about it and let's work on the side that does. But at TIER, since we believe in neuroplasticity, we make them use that body over and over again. So we might be having them weight bearing through things, doing a lot of active movement, even getting them up to walk so it'll trigger and fire those neurons again and wake them up. I had a friend, it was actually a former peer of mine that went to Sam Houston State University. One day, this guy comes into TIER and he's my patient. He was a teacher and a performer here in the Houston area, and he had had a stroke. His whole left side was out, and he had lost all hope for playing his instrument again. I took that as a cue to come in and try to encourage him to try it a different way. We found a group in America that makes one-handed saxophones. He started learning, he can play now. He's doing concerts, he's teaching again. So he has a new normal. It's not the way that he probably wanted it to go. I'm sure he wants his left hand back, but we set him up to do something a little different, and he's fulfilling his dreams and his life purpose.
There are 3 levels of coma: the state of coma, the vegetative state, and the minimally conscious state. As it turns out, music therapy is effective with patients in a minimally conscious state. While conducting brain scans with such patients, responses to musical input were stronger than to any other stimulus. Ryan Logan was one such patient.
He was diagnosed with an AVM. It's very rare, less than 1% of Americans have it. And it's basically a ball of arteries and veins with no capillaries. It occurs during fetal development, but we didn't know about it until he started having headaches and visual disturbances. It was very large and very complicated, and before you go in and remove something like that, you have to shoot glue around it to make the surgery much safer. The AVM actually started shutting down by itself, which was even more rare. And all that blood has to reroute somewhere, and it went too fast and it wasn't controlled, and he had a massive brain hemorrhage. They stopped counting at 7 aneurysms, and they just said, you know, this was a ticking time bomb. We were in the pediatric intensive care unit. He was hooked up to every kind of equipment imaginable, and his blood pressure and pulse, every time the music therapist came in, you could just watch it drop to a lower rate, and you could tell that it was really affecting him, and he wasn't responsive at all. So I thought, wow, that's awesome. I didn't know there was music therapy.
Cognitively, we weren't really sure where he was. He wasn't able to really tell us a lot with his hand, the hand that he was using that was also restless. He couldn't even sit up by himself. He couldn't hold his head up. The ability to even just reach was a big goal.
Keeping his head up and actually being able to reach his hand up. And I brought in an iPad and had it on GarageBand with a bunch of cool sounds, the guitar sounds and stuff. And he was very, you could tell his movement was still ataxic, very, very weak, but he tried so hard, and he was really working hard. You know, he could maybe get 2 or 3 times up to the iPad, and then he would need a break.
Yeah, he fatigued really fast. We took lots of rest breaks.
We couldn't even really place it anywhere but kind of right in front of him, because anything higher than this, he didn't have the strength for. I brought in different instruments, more instruments, different activities that would just encourage him to maintain this upright position or to hit as much as he could. Just really strengthen endurance and continuing to give him something that was really motivating to him. so that his time with Kristen and her guiding the movements and doing the positioning and stuff that he needed, the motivation was the music at that time. And so he was able to really get a lot out of the sessions.
So the first 30 minutes that I would have Ryan, he needed a lot of stretching and mobilizations to prepare his body for what we were going to do. We would do things with his pelvis, with his spine, with his left arm, a lot of things that we had to do to prepare him instead of just saying, I want you just to reach for something. And as his head control got stronger and his trunk control got stronger, we could do things in standing. We would have like 3 people, one holding his head, one holding his arm, me kind of wrestling him in his trunk and his leg. Today we only had one. And then we made a splint for his hand, which I actually just kept his hand open. I actually did a technique to his hand to provide input to inhibit the hand from curling up so that he can place weight through that side, but also be aware of that side. Because when we also first saw him, he would only turn his head to the right, and he kept his head to the right. So he almost had what we call like a left neglect. But we have been working a lot on visual scanning, attending to the left. Family has been, I've had them stay on his left side. So now he's actually turning his head to his left. Like even today, he shook your hand and he reached over and shook it, which was great, and he would not be able to do that.
Even where I place the drums encourages the weight just out of reach, exactly. Helps him to really, if she's got his arm positioned correctly, then he's got to reach over to hit the drum and get more weight on that arm.
He's improving constantly as far as cognitively, but also physically.
And the cognitive improvement because he responds appropriately to questions.
The head nods are so clear right now, especially for no. No is easier than yes for him. A lot of times he'll just give us a thumbs up as well. Or whenever he's in pain, he'll do this sometimes, or just like, hey, I need a break.
And he initiates that on his own.
We need cueing for that one. Yeah. We're getting better with that one.
And he stims a lot with that.
It's a movement disorder that he has that we're trying to break up through things with like music therapy. So with him reaching to the right to the drums isn't breaking up that kind of movement.
We're really going to start incorporating rhythm to prevent him from starting each movement with this. Just want him to 1, 2, 3 strum without having to go back and breaking that cycle.
He's been doing good. He's really come a long way, and I think if you haven't seen him in a week or two and then you see him, they can really tell the difference.
Even today, for me, it's so different. Like he's improving all the time. Him even being able to sit up by himself was not doing that Friday at all.
Just last week Friday.
Literally 4 days ago.
Right.
No floor can't get pushed.
And family it's a really great question.
Hard,
he works really hard, and family has been so awesome, and they want us to push him. They, of course, we talk with him what we're doing.
Sit on the third one. 1, 2, 3. Sit. Good. Standing on 3.
When he's really working and you can physically see that he's starting to get shaky, he's getting to his end, Kristen will usually say, okay, we need 10 more, or we need 5 more, or whatever, and that puts a definite number in his head to work for, and that gives him that motivation to push that last little bit. And then he knows we're going to sit down, we're going to rest after that.
Or one more whip and one more nay-nay.
One more whip, one more nay-nay.
What if it turns out that just putting a CD player in every room and playing music on a regular basis engages patients in a dynamic way?
I would say that's fantastic, because that makes it a lot easier and accessible for patients. But I think that there's a reason that hasn't worked thus far. It's because we found that it's not as effective, and that there is an element of the human training and the human response, and that's what makes us therapists, is how we respond with music. A CD player can't respond to the patient with music, and so I would like to think we would have found that out already if that were the case. As a biased clinician and somebody who's in the field of neurologic music therapy, of course we'd want to say that we need more research about music in the brain. I think the more that we find out how music profoundly activates our brain and how it profoundly can aid in neuroplasticity, it will change the future of healthcare. When we really understand the role that music can play in recovery and how important it is to our lives. From a neurologic perspective, not from an emotional perspective, but really what our brain is talking and what our brain is saying, and how music helps to communicate in our brain, that it will change the future of rehab.
much that external stimuli of the music. I forgot to turn my ringer off.
Do it, Dolphin. Do it.
You want me to do it?
Yeah. But you...
Oh, it was out of tune. It was driving me crazy. I'm like, oh.
No. Go to bed.
The birds fly over the lake, the cattails sway in the wind, the gray spreads over the sky.
Is that my good side or my bad
Day
side?
has come to an end. Chiaroscuro spears of light split the canvas, harbingers of conquerors or peaceful guests. Will they subjugate us or just open up our blind eyes? Bring meaning to our lives. Caller number 2, you say they come from another world. But Frank Drake would be thrilled. The question is, can they be killed? We must defend our planet using deadly force. They may seem friendly, but it might be a Trojan horse. Will we let them hate us, or will we see them with our blind eyes and blast them from the skies? Intergalactic social blunder.
Dance. Nay, nay.
I was wondering.
That's your move. That's your wedding move. Wedding single.
was.
Oh, it was? Darn.
And go.